New here tonight, he spent his entire life living and working in the United States, but when it came time to collect his Social Security benefits, one Florida man says he has not received one penny.
Instead, he got a surprise reality check. The government told him he's not who he says he is, and now he's been fighting to prove them wrong. I-Team investigative reporter Katie Legrone shares his story tonight.
Outside Jimmy Class's mobile home in Clearwater, symbols of American pride hang not just front and center, but on the side of his home, in the back. America is, after all, the only home this 66-year-old has ever known.
I moved to the U.S. in 1959.
How long have you been here?
64 years.
But after more than a half of a century in the U.S., where he's lived, worked, went to school, got married, had kids, paid his taxes,
Mr. Class, you will be entitled to retirement benefits.
even voted, Class says in 2020,
Instead of receiving my first check,
he discovered
I didn't have any thoughts.
he's not a U.S. citizen.
I just was like blindsided.
Class says it all came to light after he applied for the Social Security benefits he paid into his entire working life.
You gotta be kidding me. You know, 1 month you tell me I should expect my first check, second Wednesday of 2020, but instead I get a letter stating that I haven't proven to them that I'm here legally.
You see, Class was born in Canada, his mom Canadian, but his father American, born and raised in New York.
This is Dad.
Yep, that's Dad.
The family moved to the U.S. when Class was 2 and stayed here.
That's me as a Boy Scout
In America.
in America.
As he got older, he says he just assumed he, too, was American, a dual citizen. Documents he laid out for us are a glimpse of his deep roots in the U.S.
This is when you know you're old, when the old driver's licenses were paper.
Roots, he says, were never questioned. Not when he got his Social Security card, driver's license, or voter registration card.
I've been voting for over 40 years. I guess I'm in a lot of trouble.
Class was even approved to serve as a Marine for the U.S. military
I signed up to defend this country.
and work for the New Jersey State Police. His citizenship status, never an issue, he says.
The only thing they asked me for was my Social Security card and my driver's license.
After he learned he wasn't really a U.S. citizen, he formally applied for status, but was denied. U.S. Immigration Services wouldn't share details with us, stating they don't talk about individual cases. But in this 2022 denial letter, the agency stated Class didn't provide enough evidence to prove his father lived in the U.S. for 10 years before Class was born, a requirement.
I've seen a handful of cases like this. They don't come around every day.
Indira Demine is a Fort Myers-based immigration attorney. She says Class's case is a reflection of a large, complicated, and changing U.S. immigration system that can't always accurately track who's here legally, illegally, or somewhere in between.
For many years, the DMV, the different agencies didn't necessarily communicate with each other. And so the documentation that you need to renew your driver's license or for the Social Security benefits were not as stringent as they are now.
How did he get issued a Social Security card, though?
That's a good question. Quite possible that back then, the requirements to have a social is just not the same as it is today.
So is it fair, though, that he was issued a Social Security card, he got his Social Security taxes withheld, he worked all of his life, he paid his taxes?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I worked my 50 years and I paid into my Social Security. They should be paying me.
What happens if this doesn't get resolved?
Well, I guess they get to give my money to someone else.
Will it make you look at America differently?
I'll probably move back to Canada.
You would consider leaving?
Yep, and say bye-bye America.
Class says he contacted Senator Rubio's office, hired an immigration attorney, even a genealogist to dig up records to help him in his fight, a fight that continues.
Another Floridian now stepping forward to share her own citizenship nightmare. This after we first uncovered a Florida man who spent his entire life here living and working in America, only to find out he's not a U.S. citizen.
And investigative reporter Katie Legrone has an update on his case and speaks with a Florida woman now dealing with a similar citizen's crisis.
These are snapshots of Cynthia Downs' life on the farm in Chattahoochee, a small city just outside Tallahassee. The land and her husband's family for generations is where the couple have called home for more than 30 years. It's where they raised their girls, started their own hobby farm, and are well into training the next generation. For Cynthia, it's the perfect life for a small-town American girl who always assumed she was American.
I just didn't never think about nothing else because I paid my taxes. I done everything everybody else done. I've been here all my life. And I've never been to Canada except for when I was born, and I didn't remember that.
Cynthia's mom was Canadian, her dad American. She says the family moved to the States when she was just an infant. She's called America home ever since.
I've done everything everybody else does. There's never no red flags.
That is until she went to renew her driver's license a few years ago.
You find out that you're not an American citizen when you're 62 years old?
Yes, yes.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was crazy.
Since then, Cynthia says she's been fighting to prove her father's American roots, digging up school records, her dad's birth certificates. His military records were destroyed in a fire. Without this evidence, Cynthia's not eligible for dual citizenship, which means she won't be able to collect her Social Security retirement benefits.
About $2,000 a month.
This is a lot of money.
Yes, ma'am, it is for me.
You're getting emotional. Why?
Because it just tears me up every time because I just thought I'd done everything right. And it comes time that I get the money I earned, I can't get it.
Who do you blame?
I think it's the system.
Cynthia's citizenship fight isn't all that unique.
I just was like blindsided.
Last month, we introduced you to Jimmy Class, also born in Canada, raised in America, and lived life as an American, even voted when he could.
I've been voting for over 40 years. I guess I'm in a lot of trouble.
Until Social Security refused to pay him his retirement benefits, claiming he wasn't a U.S. citizen.
How long have you been here?
64 years.
Our story about Class went viral,
This one was from the New York Post. Citizen came. Social Security shock.
attracting new attention from Senator Marco Rubio, whose office confirmed they are in touch with Class to, quote, offer assistance.
I'm not quitting. Not quitting. I'm going to get my Social Security.
Immigration attorneys, including Cynthia's, tell us what's happening to her and Jimmy Class is a result of America's complex, confusing, and constantly changing immigration system.
It's a reflection of a poor system, poor communication, and a breakdown over many years by different agencies. No one pointed out to either of the people that we're talking about that they didn't have proof of citizenship. No one ever asked for that until they were approaching retirement. That's a big problem.
Now, Cynthia and Jimmy are learning later in life what they believe they should have been told decades earlier.
I'm supposed to be retired. You know, my pension and Social Security, that's what I work for. I get my pension, but I don't get my Social Security.
What do you want the government to know about you and why this should get taken care of?
The same as every American in this world. I've been here, I paid my taxes, and I expect to get my little Social Security back. It's just not fair.
Cynthia and Jimmy have both hired immigration attorneys to help them. Jimmy tells us he even got a visit from the FBI earlier this week, who told him to withdraw his voting registration until his citizenship issues are resolved, or he would be arrested.
This week, we're celebrating what it means to be an American. But for the past month, investigative reporter Katie Legrone has exposed how some Floridians are facing little-known barriers to becoming legal U.S. citizens.
And tonight, Katie shares the story of a veteran who joined the United States military under the promise of American citizenship, but tells us what he got instead were broken promises.
Bye, Boo.
Paul Canton is headed to work near his home in Ocala. On this day, a neighbor gives him a ride.
I have somebody who gives me a ride to work, and then I get a ride home. Once I get a ride home, here I am.
It's not that Canton doesn't know how to drive. It's that he's not legally allowed to. He can't get a driver's license or even an ID card.
I kind of feel like I'm under house arrest. I can't go anywhere, do anything. There's a lot of restrictions with no identification. Can't even go cash a check.
That's because Canton isn't a legal U.S. citizen, never has been, even though he spent the last 30 years living like one.
These are some of the awards that I was given while I was in the military.
It all started when Canton, who was born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, says he was recruited to join the U.S. military. That's right, Canton isn't American, but he's got all the goods to show he served as an American soldier in the U.S. Marines. Which is how he explains his citizenship crisis began.
I was told if I got an honorable discharge, then I would get citizenship at the end of my tour.
Automatically? And then what happened?
I got out, assumed I had citizenship, I voted, I did everything a citizen would do.
He got married here, raised his kids, paid his taxes, even voted in U.S. elections. Until a trip to his local DMV to renew his driver license a few years ago, quite literally,
Kind of shock.
stopped him in his American tracks.
I figured somehow somebody had, forgot to push a button or do something. I didn't think it was going to be anything, here's my paperwork, here's my military service, and it was going to be done.
It wasn't, and 5 years later, still isn't.
It seems like every time we go back and try and deal with this, it's just another door closed.
According to federal immigration law, foreigners who serve in the U.S. military are eligible for citizenship if they serve during a period of hostility. Canton enlisted during the Gulf War in the early 90s, but he didn't become active duty for another 7 months after that period of hostility ended, which, according to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration, made all the difference on his path to calling America home.
He served our country. This is not fair.
Elizabeth Ricci is Canton's immigration attorney, working pro bono to help him solve what she says is a common practice by America's government.
They are told by recruiters, who, by the way, get a bonus for the number of recruits they sign up, we'll take care of it. We'll get your citizenship. Don't worry about it.
Ricci and Canton are now taking his case to federal court. But the notion of America recruiting foreigners into its military under false promises isn't new.
Unfortunately, it is not new. It has been going on for many years.
Rose Carmen Goldberg is director of the Veterans Law Practicum at UC Berkeley School of Law. Earlier this year, the group released this report detailing America's long history of recruiting immigrants to serve our country only to abandon them after service. The report, titled Broken Promises.
This problem is so big that the federal government itself doesn't even know the scope of the problem.
In terms of the numbers of people, is there any way to quantify that?
Rough estimates are hundreds or thousands. No one knows.
In an email, a spokesperson from the Department of Defense said it does not sanction bringing immigrants into the U.S. military under false promises of obtaining citizenship, but goes on to state while non-citizens who enlist under the law are qualified for expedited naturalization, those pursuits are between the individual and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Paul Canton doesn't know what his future in America holds. After he joined America's military, he lost his citizenship in Australia, leaving the father of two and recent widow.
She's still here because if we buried her, I've got no way to go visit with her.
Essentially stateless and pleading for America to give what he says it promised when he stepped up to fight and defend her.
Why are you fighting this so hard?
I've got nowhere else to go.
U.S. Citizenship and Immigration not commenting on Paul Canton's case, telling us they don't discuss individual cases. But a spokesperson says they recognize the sacrifice of veterans and are committed to properly adjudicating applications. Canton, meantime, is still waiting for his first hearing in federal court.
Folks who came to the United States to serve and protect with the promise of becoming U.S. citizens. But somewhere along the way, they ended up being kicked out of the country after they fought to protect it. Tonight, ABC Action News investigative reporter Katie LeGrone continues her eye-opening look at veterans who were denied citizenship. Tonight, sharing the story of one man who hoped to become an American but instead was deported.
Speaking to us from an apartment in San Diego, David Barrio's American story
I came here to further my education.
Began more than 2 decades ago and nearly 10,000 miles away.
I was born in Nairobi, Kenya.
In 1998, Barrio came to America on a student visa. While here, he says, he was persuaded by an Army recruiter to enlist, promising him free school and U.S. citizenship.
I was like, okay, That's interesting.
Barrio joined, serving in the Army and eventually the Air Force Reserves.
For the love of serving the country, for the love of defending the Constitution.
But by 2007, Barrio says he was forced to leave the military after his recruiter was court-martialed and found guilty of unlawfully enlisting African national students, among them Barrio. While Army discharge papers he provided us show he was honorably discharged for an erroneous entry, Army investigative records he also provided us appear to detail how Barrio was one of dozens of Kenyan students recruited in a fraudulent enlistment scheme.
My recruiter was fraudulently recruiting internationals to meet his quota, a recruiting quota.
We reached out to the Army about the case and have not heard back. But what happened to Barrio after he left the military inspired him to talk about it publicly.
It's difficult to explain what reasoning they used to justify my deportation.
Barrio, who thought he was legally enlisted when he joined the military, was stripped of his military certification and VA card and deported back to Kenya. But not before he says he also spent a year detained in a Texas migrant detention center.
I don't know if they were trying to make me give up. I don't know if they were trying to radicalize me and make me fight the system or say bad things about the United States.
Barrio is among an unknown number of U.S. veterans who honorably served in America's armed forces but then got deported without the American citizenship and other benefits they claim they were promised.
This problem is so big that the federal government itself doesn't even know the scope of the problem.
The rarely talked about issue highlighted by the Veterans Law Practicum at UC Berkeley in this recent report titled Broken Promises.
Despite being required to do so, they are not tracking the number of veterans they deport. There are requirements in place saying that military service is supposed to be taken into account during immigration proceedings. That rule has not been followed.
When asked for a response about deported veterans and the allegations of broken citizenship promises they face, the Department of Defense referred us to the Veterans Administration, who told us in a lengthy email they are working with the Department of Homeland Security to, quote, identify and prioritize the return of current and former U.S. military members who were removed from the United States and helping them access benefits including immigration and naturalization assistance.
This is a veteran issue, it's not an immigration issue, because we were veterans when we got deported.
In 2022, 14 years after he was deported, Barrio was allowed back into America through a new government program for deported veterans. A few months later, he finally got the U.S. citizenship he says he was promised by that recruiter decades earlier.
It was overdue. I was happy.
Today, the dad of two is going to school to become a nurse. He's also co-founder of a support group for deported veterans, hoping his story raises awareness about a problem facing some who come to this country to defend it, but are ignored when they need the saving.
Deported veterans are dying across the borders. They know about us, but when you're trying to get back the legal way, we have so many blockades, it becomes a complicated mess.
While Barrio has his legal status, he's still fighting for the GI benefits he says he was promised, which would help him pay for school. But despite everything he's been through, he tells me he considers himself a proud American. I'm my team investigator, Katie LaGrone, taking action for you.